They were never meant to be opened again. 10 libraries, scattered across continents, buried under collapsed empires, hidden beneath religious capitals, hold manuscripts that contradict every official timeline we are taught to trust. Pages that shouldn't still exist. Records no country will admit owning. For decades, these vaults stayed sealed under seizure orders, mislabeled inventories, and security classifications that outlived the agencies that wrote them. Yet fragments keep escaping. Diagrams centuries ahead of their era, star maps drawn with impossible precision, testimonies about events that had not yet occurred. The pattern is the same every time. Someone finds a room, a crate, a corridor, and within weeks, the discovery is erased. If these libraries are real, history is not what we think. Something inside them was never meant to be read. For more than a century, historians have documented a strange, repeating pattern. Whenever an empire collapses, a government restructures, or a scientific institution abruptly loses funding, a hidden library surfaces, only to disappear again behind sealed doors. These are not ordinary archives. Their inventories contain titles that appear nowhere else. Their catalog numbers skip entire sequences, and the personnel assigned to them rarely stay long enough to speak about what they handled. Officially, none of these vaults store anything unusual. Unofficially, their contents have triggered quiet seizures, classified audits, and sudden transfers of the people who got too close. The unifying thesis is simple and deeply unsettling. 10 seemingly unrelated libraries reveal the same behavioral signature. Knowledge that contradicts the dominant narrative is isolated, redacted, or erased. Centuries apart, thousands of miles away, the custodians behave as if they are following the same unwritten protocol. Manuscripts are misfiled under false dates. Scientific diagrams are cataloged as ceremonial. Star charts are stored in theology wings. Witness accounts are labeled cultural mythology, despite matching modern data. Different institutions, different motives, but the same handprint on every sealed door. The pattern sharpens when you compare the intervention methods. European agencies use restricted corridors. Asian archives rely on misdirection through reclassification. Religious bodies enforce silence through ritualized access codes. Private foundations favor acquisition, followed by disappearance. Yet the outcome never changes. The material vanishes from public reach, leaving behind only fragments, citations without pages, names without context, references to documents that no longer exist. And the timing matters. A new declassification window in 2024 exposed cross-referenced inventory numbers that were never meant to meet. For the first time, these 10 libraries can be studied as a system, not isolated accidents. Their secrets overlap, their omissions align, and their guardians all acted as though they were protecting something far older than their institutions. And the first story is already classified. The subterranean archive of Derinkuyu. The discovery happened by accident. In 2019, a structural survey beneath the lower levels of Derinkuyu revealed a sealed stone aperture no local record had ever mentioned. The city's underground networks are vast, but this chamber sat deeper, far beneath known passageways, carved with tools that predated every regional chronology. The lead surveyor, Murat Çelik, noted something else. The air was clean, too clean. Ventilation shafts, impossibly narrow, fed the chamber from sources no one could trace. For a moment, the team believed they had found another living area. Then they opened the door, and everything changed. Inside lay shelves carved directly into the bedrock, stacked with slate tablets and mineral-treated parchment that had resisted decay. The first micro-hook hit immediately. The inscriptions didn't match any Anatolian script. A second shock followed minutes later. The pigments reflected infrared like modern engineering diagrams. Nothing fit the expected timeline. Çelik photographed everything, logging each tablet in a notebook he kept in his jacket pocket. That pocket would matter later. At the back wall, they found metallic fragments. Soft, alloy-like, yet untouched by corrosion. Their composition matched no catalog in Turkey's geological registry. Even stranger, vibration tests indicated hollow spaces behind the wall, suggesting additional chambers sealed even earlier. Evidence accumulated fast. A linguistic analyst brought in for on-site review reported parallel syntax to Proto-Elamite structures, yet with astronomical references far too advanced for that period. One tablet depicted airflow patterns identical to modern cross-current ventilation systems. "It's like someone engineered the air centuries ahead of its time," the analyst said. Then he paused. The scans disagreed. The carbon dates placed the surface pigments at nearly 4,000 years old. The tools that could have carved the precision channels did not exist in any nearby culture. Still, Selig recorded every detail: angles, mineral layers, temperature gradients. But after 2 days, the research halted abruptly. Suppression began without warning. Uniformed officials arrived before dawn, citing a structural instability protocol. Cameras were confiscated. Hard drives were removed. Selig's notebook, the one in his jacket, was taken during a search he was not allowed to observe. Access tunnels were sealed with welded plates. Public communication about the chamber was labeled unverified and quietly scrubbed from municipal records. One of the translators, a woman named Aylin, missed her daughter's graduation during the sudden reassignment. She never returned to the site or to the profession. In the aftermath, Derinkuyu's lower levels were closed indefinitely. Local guides were instructed to redirect tourists. The chamber's location vanished from internal maps, replaced by a gray block marked "No Entry." The officials never explained what threat a room full of stone tablets posed. Kelik, now bound by a non-disclosure order, has spoken only once. "The ventilation wasn't ancient," he said. "It was deliberate." 3 months later, another sealed library surfaced farther west, with tighter restrictions. The Vatican's Corridor 8B locked index. The second library was not buried underground. It was hidden in plain sight. Deep inside Vatican City's archival complex, past public corridors and supervised reading rooms, lies a hallway never listed in visitor inventories. Staff call it Corridoio 8B, Corridor 8B, a passage that appears on no public blueprint but is referenced in internal maintenance logs dating back to 1899. The discovery became public only because a junior restoration assistant, Paolo Benedetti, reported an unusual draft of cold air coming from behind a sealed marble panel. His supervisor dismissed it, but Paolo returned after hours. When he pried the panel loose, he exposed a long, dustless corridor illuminated by a single electric line, wired with components decades newer than the stone that housed them. Something was being kept alive. That was the first microhook. At the end of the corridor stood a reinforced oak door with iron locking braces far heavier than anything used in standard ecclesiastical storage. Paolo found a second anomaly: a catalog plate stamped 98B12R, a code that did not match any shelf classification in the Vatican's open registry. When he entered the code into an internal terminal, the interface returned only one phrase: Annex Protocol 12R. No description, no title. Just the protocol. No one replied when he asked for clarification. This was the second microhook. Evidence emerged through fragments. A retired archivist, interviewed off-record, admitted that Corridor 8B stored confiscated manuscripts, documents too destabilizing for doctrinal continuity. He described maps depicting pre-Columbian transoceanic journeys, treatises on astronomical cycles that matched modern Lagrange point calculations, and a set of bound vellum sheets outlining a cosmology in which Earth's timeline forks under certain celestial alignments. He claimed the handwriting on those sheets did not match any known medieval script. Paolo later reported seeing a light through the door's keyhole, steady, white, mechanical. Someone was actively maintaining the chamber. Suppression followed the familiar pattern. Paolo was summoned to a disciplinary hearing for unauthorized access to restricted areas. His badge was deactivated the same afternoon. The corridor entrance was resealed with a new marble panel that blended perfectly into the wall. The retired archivist who spoke to journalists received a formal censure. Within a month, he entered quiet retirement and ceased communication entirely. And in the middle of this, one of Paolo's colleagues, a woman named Lucia, was suddenly relocated to a remote indexing post in Sardinia. She left the same night. She never went home. The consequences extended beyond personnel. All internal references to IX-8B12R disappeared from the digital archive. The maintenance logs that once mentioned Corridor 8B were overwritten with newer files marked archived. The electric line leading into the hidden passage was rerouted behind a locked junction box, its circuit number erased. Paolo's final attempt to request documentation ended with a single message: access not authorized under Annex Protocol 12R. 2 years later, another vault appeared, its catalog codes echoing the same mysterious 12R tag. The Taklamakan Desert Manuscript Room. The third library surfaced where almost nothing should survive. The interior of the Taklamakan Desert, in a region Chinese surveyors call the Silent Crescent. In 2021, a remote sensing drone mapping subsurface density shifts detected a rectangular void beneath a collapsed frontier outpost last used during the Qing dynasty. The heat signatures made no sense. The chamber stayed at a constant 58 degrees despite surface temperatures above 120. When the excavation team breached the sand crust, they found a narrow stone stairway descending into a room no larger than a freight container, and yet the walls held shelves. Clean shelves, dustless, as if someone had closed the door yesterday. Then the light changed. A reflective shimmer ran across a copper plate bolted into the floor, the first microhook, hinting at material treatment far beyond the site's supposed age. Evidence came quickly. Inside were scrolls wrapped in reed fiber, sealed with lacquer that fluoresced faintly under UV. A paleographer on site recognized fragments of Kharosthi and Sogdian characters, but mixed with symbols that predated both. The scrolls weren't random. They formed a sequence. Astronomical tables, migration routes, and climatological notes recorded with a precision the region's known travelers could not have achieved. One table charted star positions using a coordinate system uncannily aligned with modern RA deck notation. Another described a wind pattern consistent with satellite models published only in the last 20 years. The dates disagreed. Carbon analysis placed the papyrus at roughly 1,600 years old, but the ink composition traced to a mining technique introduced only in the late 19th century. That contradiction triggered the second microhook. The copper plate proved stranger still. Etched on its surface was a single inscription: 1904, entry verified. No one could explain the year. No one could explain the inscription style, which resembled neither Chinese carving nor Central Asian metallurgy. A geologist noted that the alloy had a melting point inconsistent with regional smelting capabilities. The chamber seemed to be a repository created across disconnected eras, as if updated by unknown visitors. A young translator, Mei Ling, spent her nights cataloging the symbols, missing her father's surgery back home. That was her humane loss. She told colleagues something she shouldn't have. The entries feel recent. The next morning, she was removed from the project. Suppression arrived under the guise of safety. A military convoy sealed the perimeter, citing subsurface risk. All scrolls were packed into weatherproof crates and flown out before the team finished photographing them. Hard drives were collected. Digital backups were erased on site. The copper plate vanished first. The excavation trench was buried by bulldozers within 3 days, and satellite access to the coordinates was quietly restricted. When the team requested a final inventory, they received a single phrase: records pending review. No follow-up came. In the weeks that followed, officials altered the project's paperwork, listing the chamber as collapsed and inaccessible. But one detail refused to fade. That plate marked 1904, A year with no connection to any known expedition in the region. A year that felt planted. 6 months later, a European vault surfaced. Its files stamped with the same unexplained 1904 date. If these first 3 were coincidences, Story 4 will test that theory. The Berlin Technical Registry Vault. The 4th library did not look ancient. It looked administrative, cold, fluorescent, bureaucratic. In 2022, a renovation team updating fire suppression lines at Berlin's Technical Registry stumbled upon a sealed steel door hidden behind a false utility wall. The registry had served as a patent deposit office since the late 1800s, but no architectural diagram mentioned a chamber in that location. The workers reported the anomaly to a supervisor. He told them to ignore it. They didn't. When they cut through the wall, they exposed a heavy pressure-rated door equipped with a locking wheel more suited to maritime bulkheads. The serial number had been filed off. Then something rattled inside. That was the first microhook. When officials forced the chamber open, they found rows of metal shelving lined with binders, thousands of them, organized with precise labels dating from 1904 to 1945. The year caught immediate attention. 1904, echoing the Taklamakan plate. Each binder contained technical diagrams, prototype descriptions, and device schematics submitted for patent consideration, but never approved, published, or publicly acknowledged. Some were mundane, others were impossible. A set of files outlined a propulsion system using field shift principles not formally explored until the 1960s. Another binder contained lens geometries identical to modern adaptive optics, but the carbon dating of the paper and ink held steady within the early 20th century. The technology was decades too early. Second microhook. Evidence deepened as examiners noticed red stamps on certain files. Sonderbehandlung, nicht veröffentlichen. Special handling, not for release. A historian recognized the mark from pre-war suppression protocols reserved for destabilizing inventions. Then came the folders containing device images blurred with deliberate micro-scratches. Human hands had manually obscured key components. Someone had edited the past. A single binder, more worn than the others, bore a classification label matching an obscure archival directive. Anlage Protocol 12R. The German analog of Annex Protocol 12R from the Vatican Vault. That was the third microhook, a thread connecting continents. Suppression arrived quickly. The registry floor was evacuated under the pretext of asbestos risk. External researchers were denied access. The binders were boxed and transferred to an undisclosed government facility. Data technicians who scanned the material were reassigned with 48-hour notice. One archivist, Thomas Ryder, had planned to take his son to a school exhibition that week. The reassignment forced him to leave Berlin the same night. He missed the event entirely. His colleagues never saw him again. That was the humane loss. The aftermath followed a familiar script. The renovation logs were redacted. A new wall replaced the breach within 2 days. Employees were instructed to sign updated confidentiality agreements, many with wording referencing restricted innovations with national security relevance. The registry's public index quietly removed thousands of entries from its historical patent lists, replacing them with unavailable, record incomplete. Requests for clarification returned the same automated message. Material archived under elevated classification. The most troubling detail came from a technician who examined the steel door before removal. She noticed heat discoloration around the hinges. Recent, not historical. The vault hadn't been sealed for decades. Someone had opened it from the inside within the last few years. 1 year later, a Pacific anomaly surfaced. Its restricted files echoing the same suppressed technologies. The Hawaiian Undersea Knowledge Capsule. The 5th library was discovered where no archive should exist, beneath 600 meters of Pacific water off the coast of Hawaii. In late 2023, an oceanographic survey vessel mapping volcanic ridges recorded an angular sonar return that did not resemble basalt, coral, or any known wreckage. The object showed edges, straight, repeating, mathematically perfect. When the remotely operated vehicle descended, its lights revealed a geometric structure half buried in silt. A smooth, obsidian-colored capsule with seams too precise for natural formation. As the ROV's camera panned across its surface, symbols flickered in the light, incised glyphs that shimmered as though coated with optical layers. Then the reading spiked. Magnetic flux surged around the capsule despite the absence of any visible machinery. That was the first microhook. Inside, things became stranger. A hydraulically operated manipulator arm scraped away sediment, revealing a recessed entry panel. Pressure analysis indicated the interior was hollow and stable. When the team opened the hatch, silt drifted outward like exhaled breath. Within the capsule sat racks of waterproofed scrolls made of an unfamiliar polymer. Flexible, translucent, impervious to decades underwater. Yet preliminary tests suggested they were older than the earliest Polynesian migrations. Each scroll held diagrams of ocean currents, seafloor geometry, and migratory patterns mapped with precision rivaling modern satellite data. The currents disagreed. Many of the patterns matched oceanic changes that only stabilized in the last century, not centuries ago. That was the second microhook. The skeptics intervened early. Some researchers argue the patterns are nothing more than geological chance, misinterpreted by an excited survey team. But the physical evidence said otherwise. One scroll showed a network of deep-sea channels connecting volcanic conduits, routes unknown to both modern cartographers and ancient navigators. Another depicted electromagnetic nodal points along the Pacific Plate, their coordinates aligning eerily with classified naval communication arrays. And etched near the final rack was a small metal plate marked Revision 3, filed pending approval, suggesting a bureaucratic framework behind the capsule's creation. A junior engineer, Aidan Hale, worked through the night comparing the diagrams to modern charts. He missed a long-planned family ceremony on Oahu. He told colleagues he'd make it up to them after the report. He never got that chance. Suppression came from above, literally. A black-painted vessel with no visible registration appeared on radar and anchored near the survey ship. Orders arrived instructing the crew to cease all activity and surrender their data. The scrolls were packed into airtight cases and transferred to the unknown vessel under escort. The capsule itself was rigged with cutting charges and detonated, collapsing into the trench. The ocean swallowed the evidence within seconds. Within days, the survey logs were rewritten to describe the discovery as volcanic debris of indeterminate structure. The crew signed non-disclosure agreements referencing a classification level none of them had seen before. Aidan was relocated to a mainland facility and removed from oceanographic research entirely. He stopped answering messages. Then he vanished. Exactly 4 months later, another archive emerged, this time inside a religious compound with even tighter control. The sixth library was hidden not in stone or steel, but in ritual. In early 2024, a former Jesuit novice leaked a fragment of an internal inventory, describing an unlisted repository known only as Archivum Memoriae. The name surfaced inside a footnote attached to a training manual, an instruction to consult the memory archive for prior irregularities. No Jesuit house admitted to maintaining such a collection. But the novice, Raphael, claimed it existed beneath an unassuming monastery in northern Spain, accessible only to a handful of senior scholars. His account gained attention after he shared GPS-tagged photographs of a stairwell that appeared nowhere in the monastery's architectural records. Then the timestamp shifted. The image metadata placed the photo 1 hour before he claimed to have taken it. That was the first microhook. Raphael described the entrance as a narrow corridor, lined with frescoes depicting celestial diagrams rather than biblical scenes. At its end stood a door of dark cedar reinforced with brass inlay. When opened, it revealed a circular room filled with shelves of leather-bound journals, handwritten testimonies from missionaries spanning more than 4 centuries. But these were not theological reflections. They were field notes on events that the Church chose not to include in its annals. Reports of anomalous sky patterns observed during 17th century eclipses, encounters with indigenous groups describing metal birds, and detailed logs of individuals exhibiting knowledge of events decades before their time. The testimonies disagreed. Several journals documented the same phenomenon on the same date. Yet the missionaries had served thousands of miles apart. That was the second microhook. One set of journals, wrapped in red twine, referenced an internal directive, Protocol 12R, identical to the tag found in the Vatican vault. The entries described orders to transfer certain testimonies to higher custody, a phrase theologians could not decipher. Another journal contained a drawing of a triangular constellation pattern that perfectly matched an observation published by astrophysicists only 3 years ago. Raphael realized the implications. Someone had preserved accounts of precognitive or anomalous knowledge long before modern science existed. He confided this to a senior mentor. That same night, he was asked to leave the monastery for the good of his formation. The suppression unfolded with institutional precision. The stairwell Raphael photographed was sealed behind new plaster. The fresco corridor was repainted into a blank hallway. The journals he referenced, everyone tied to Protocol 12R, vanished from their shelves. Monks who had spoken with him were temporarily reassigned to remote houses. One librarian, Brother Matteo, had promised Raphael he would safeguard a specific journal containing a rare triple witness account. Matteo never delivered it. He never boarded the train home. His absence marked the humane loss. Requests for documentation went unanswered. Researchers attempting to contact the monastery received templated replies citing internal restructuring. The monastery's public records erased all mention of the subterranean rooms. Even satellite imagery was updated with shadow-matching overlays that obscured the exact building shape. The Church denied the archive's existence. Yet the leak of Protocol 12R continued to circulate in scholarly circles, quietly, uneasily. Within a year, a Cold War-era reading room resurfaced, its sealed files mirroring the same 12R directive. From here on, the pattern stops asking for permission. The Soviet Black Index reading room. The seventh library emerged like a ghost from a vanished nation. In late 2024, during the digitization of Soviet-era administrative buildings in Novosibirsk, contractors uncovered a door welded shut behind a panel of outdated wiring. The structure had been a regional research headquarters during the Cold War, but no blueprint acknowledged an internal chamber in that wing. When inspectors forced the door open, they found a small reading room, lit by a single filament bulb still drawing power from an active, decades-old circuit. Dust lay everywhere, except on the central table, where a series of leather folders sat in perfect alignment, as if arranged minutes earlier. Then the bulb flickered. That was the first microhook. The folders bore a stamped designation feared by archivists. Chorny Index, the Black Index. The label marked materials so sensitive they were never assigned catalog numbers. Inside were transcribed reports from Soviet field operatives documenting encounters, sightings, and confiscated writings from across the bloc. But the strangest files were the ones labeled with a date range that shouldn't exist. Several reports were marked Preliminary Draft, filed 1904, echoing the impossible year from the Taklamakan chamber and Berlin vault. The chronology disagreed. Some drafts described technologies or political events that would not occur until decades later. This was the second microhook. Evidence became more unsettling when analysts noted matching directives. Protocol 12RU, the Cyrillic counterpart to the Annex Protocol seen in Vatican and Jesuit archives. These documents describe the forced acquisition of manuscripts containing temporal anomalies, knowledge appearing before its historical origin. One file recounted the seizure of a traveler's notebook in 1933, containing detailed notes about orbital physics not formalized until the 1950s. Another file documented reports from eastern Siberia, where villagers claimed officials demanded an object resembling a metal plate etched with a single number. The number, 1904. A researcher named Dr. Elena Varos attempted to correlate these mentions with declassified satellite archives. She missed her brother's wedding during the push to finish the cross-reference. That was the humane loss. Suppression escalated rapidly. Within days of the room's discovery, an unmarked convoy arrived at the building. Personnel removed the black index folders, boxed them in temperature-controlled crates, and erased the room's electrical line from the grid. Contractors were compelled to sign confidentiality agreements referencing international archival coordination. When a journalist attempted to contact Elena, her university reported she had taken an unexpected leave of absence. Her office was emptied. The building's schematics were reissued with the room replaced by a blank void. Digital maps removed the floor from view using corrupted metadata tags. Requests under Russian archival law returned the same statement. Document not found or sealed under agreement. No explanation for the 1904 entries was provided. The final clue came from a technician who inspected the light fixture before the demolition crew arrived. She swore the bulb, an antique filament design, burned brighter when she approached the folders, as if reacting to something inside. 3 months later, a vault in Geneva surfaced, its documents accelerating the pattern into impossible territory. The Geneva Temporal Documents Room, the 8th library, was never meant to be found. In early 2025, technicians servicing coolant lines beneath a scientific complex outside Geneva, officially listed as a data center annex, detected an unexplained temperature gradient. A cold pocket, rectangular, sharply defined, sitting within a corridor that did not exist on their schematics. When they drilled through the wall, the bit punched into empty air. Behind the concrete lay a steel door with biometric locks, 2 generations more advanced than the rest of the facility. Then the lock clicked, automatically, without any authorized user nearby. That was the first microhook. Inside, the temperature dropped further, precisely controlled at 41 degrees. Shelves ringed the circular chamber, each holding transparent polymer cases. And inside them, documents on acid-free stock, typed, annotated, amended. But the timestamps were wrong, very wrong. Many were labeled with event dates decades ahead of their print dates. One folder contained a seismic forecast for a 2038 fault rupture, printed on paper, manufactured in 1986. Another outlined orbital data for a satellite launched in 2009, typed on a machine discontinued in 1975. The signatures disagreed. Some documents bore analyst marks from departments that did not yet exist. Second microhook. Most disturbing was the seal stamped on the chamber's master index binder. Annex Protocol 12R. The same designation that haunted the Vatican Vault, the Jesuit Memory Archive, and the Berlin Registry. The binder contained cross-references linking those archives to this room through a classification cascade labeled Temporal Sensitivity, Tier 3. Nested in the back was a single sheet referencing an origin year, 1904. No explanation. No context. Just the year, again. Third microhook. Evidence grew stranger. One case held a series of memos describing preliminary correlations with unverified manuscript clusters, including entries from the Taklamakan desert chamber. Another file documented the arrival of a sealed container relocated from the South Pacific in 2023, matching the Hawaiian undersea capsule's disappearance. The convergence was undeniable. Every forbidden library, every confiscated record was funneling into this room. Analysts inspecting the documents noticed something else. The annotations formed a pattern, looped corrections referencing events in multiple timelines, as if the authors were adjusting predictions after each new discovery. Then suppression hit. Fast, a silent alarm triggered the moment technicians tried to photograph the shelves. Emergency shutters slammed down over the entrance. Motion sensors activated. Security personnel arrived in less than 2 minutes, escorting everyone out and confiscating their equipment. One technician, Clara Rivas, pleaded for her tablet. It held the only images she'd captured of the 12R binder. She had been planning to surprise her mother on her birthday the next day. She missed the celebration and never retrieved the tablet. That was the humane loss. Within hours, the chamber was sealed. The corridor was filled with reinforced concrete. The thermal gradient was masked in the building's HVAC logs using falsified baselines. Researchers who asked follow-up questions received termination notices. Those who persisted were visited by representatives citing cross-border archival security obligations. And the technicians? They were reassigned to remote facilities in rotating shifts, separated so they could not compare notes. But one detail leaked. Before the shutters sealed the chamber, Clara glimpsed a final line in the master index. Review cycle scheduled. Return offset 2031. The next vault surfaced in Namibia, its contents pushing the pattern past all plausible limits. The Namib Rift Library, the 9th library, appeared where no written record should survive at all. Inside a fault cavity beneath the Namib Desert, exposed briefly after a rare micro-quake in early 2025. A geological drone scanning the rift captured something impossible. Straight edges, rectangular geometry, buried inside a fissure carved entirely by natural erosion. When the first human team descended, they found a chamber formed from a stone not native to the region. Its walls lined with hexagonal tiles arranged like honeycomb. Then the dust moved, not from wind, there was none, but from vibration inside the wall itself. First, microhook. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal supporting a stack of thin, slate-like tablets, wrapped in a resin coating. The resin resisted scratching, heat, even chemical dissolvers. When researchers illuminated the engravings with rift lights, the tablets reflected a shifting spectrum, as though reading frequency, not light. The symbols carved into them were unfamiliar, yet eerily structured, mathematical glyphs, vector diagrams, and what appeared to be astronomical position logs. One tablet described a conjunction occurring in 2031, the same year noted in the Geneva Chamber's return offset entry. The forecasts disagreed. Dates and sequences contradicted known orbital cycles, as if documenting a different configuration of the sky. Second, microhook. Then came the callback, an unmistakable one. Tablet 3 bore an etched stamp. Verified 1904. Cycle initiated. Same year as the Taklamakan plate. Same year buried in the Berlin vault. Same year echoed in the Soviet Black Index. A year that kept returning, out of place, out of sequence, outliving every institution that tried to erase it. The inscription style did not match the chamber material. The tools used to etch it left microscopic signatures identical to the copper plate from the desert chamber thousands of miles away. This was the third microhook, and the point of no return for the pattern. Evidence deepened when a structural engineer discovered electromagnetic fluctuations inside the chamber, pulses occurring in repeating intervals. The pulses matched, down to the millisecond, the 44-fertig climate control rhythm noted inside the Geneva vault. The chambers were coordinated, linked, operating on a schedule no local geology could explain. A field researcher, Namusa Jolly, stayed in the rift overnight to record the pulses. She missed her sister's memorial service, her humane loss, and apologized in a voice log she never finished. At 3:17, her equipment cut out. By morning, she was gone. Suppression arrived brutally. A multinational task force sealed the rift beneath a prefabricated steel cap flown in by helicopter. Officials cited subsurface instability and hazard mitigation. The tablets were removed in shock-proof containers and loaded onto a transport with no government insignia. By the next day, satellite records of the quake had been replaced with generic data strips. When independent scientists requested access to seismic logs, they received the same phrasing used in Berlin, Geneva, and the Vatican. Archived under elevated classification. But the rift left one final anomaly. Before suppression crews sealed the chamber, A surveyor placed his hand on one hexagonal tile and felt a subtle, rhythmic warmth, as if the chamber were not storing information, as if it were waiting. Only one library remained, and it held the key that forced the final reveal, the Atlas of Silent Knowledge. The 10th library had no walls, no chamber, no coordinates. It was discovered only because a linguist in Lisbon, Dr. Aleixo Verdas, noticed an anomaly while reviewing declassified archival microfilms. 10 unrelated catalogs, spanning 5 continents and more than a century, used identical pagination gaps. Missing pages, always in the same intervals, 12, 19, 31, 44. It made no sense. Different languages, different institutions, different centuries. Yet every archive, Vatican, Berlin, Namib, Taklamakan, Geneva, followed the same pattern of absences. Then the counts aligned. First microhook, Verdas expanded the search. He traced the gaps to a cluster of suppressed monographs stored inside a defunct European repository, known informally as the Atlas Room, a neglected index once belonging to an early 20th century cartographic society. The building was abandoned, its holdings scattered, but the microfilms remained, thin, grainy, incomplete. Each roll referenced an internal collection titled The Atlas of Silent Knowledge, an anthology allegedly containing maps, journals, and cross-institutional summaries. No physical volumes survived, only catalog entries. The entries disagreed. Some listed the atlas under geophysical anomalies, others under temporal anomalies, still others under pre-catastrophic studies. Second microhook. Verdas found one more thread. Every atlas entry cross-referenced a sealed directive labeled Annex Protocol 12R. The same signature haunting the Vatican corridor, the Jesuit Memory Archive, the Berlin Vault, and the Geneva Chamber. But the atlas references added a new line none of the others mentioned. Cycle origin, 1904, verified by multi-site convergence. The year returned again, attached not to a location, but to a system, a mechanism, a decision. Third microhook. The evidence sharpened when Verdas isolated a pattern inside the pagination gaps, when he mapped the missing pages as coordinates, treating page numbers as degrees and catalog sections as axes. He uncovered a grid that corresponded precisely to 10 global sites. Derinkuyu, the Vatican 8B corridor, Taklamakan, Berlin's vault, Hawaii's capsule, the Jesuit archive, the Soviet Black Index, Geneva's temporal room, the Namib Rift, and a 10th central point over open Atlantic water. 12 labs, 10 archives, 1 missing hub. The atlas was designed as the index to every forbidden library on Earth. Then suppression came. Not from a nation, but from the system itself. Verdas's institutional login was revoked mid-session. The microfilms he had just scanned were overwritten with blank leader tape. A courier arrived at his office requesting all physical notes, under the authority of transnational archival consolidation. He refused. Hours later, he was placed on involuntary research leave. That night, his apartment lights flickered in a pattern repeating every 41 seconds. The exact rhythm of the Geneva climate cycle. He recorded the pulses until security personnel knocked on his door. He has not been seen since. His humane loss was immediate and irrevocable. But before his disappearance, Verdas emailed one final attachment to a colleague. A reconstructed atlas page, a single symbol at its center, a looped figure intersecting itself, flanked by the number 1904 and the notation Cycle Reset Pending. The symbol matched the sketches found in the Vatican Memory Archive, the etched plate in Taklamakan, and a blurred mark on a binder in the Berlin Vault. It was the first direct confirmation that none of the 10 libraries were isolated. They were components of something larger, a system designed to store, erase, and eventually reopen knowledge on a schedule no institution ever admitted existed. And that schedule points directly to the question no one wants answered. The 10 libraries form a pattern no institution has acknowledged. Yet every sealed door, every confiscated manuscript, every erased catalog number points to the same conclusion. Knowledge is not merely preserved or lost. It is managed. Across continents and centuries, entirely separate custodians behaved as though they were following a single architecture of control, protecting entries, erasing pages, obeying directives they should never have shared. And at the center of that architecture stands a single year repeated like a signal, 1904, a point of origin, or a point of reset. We do not know which. If the atlas of silent knowledge is real, it suggests one possibility more unsettling than any hidden vault: that humanity's understanding of its own timeline may have been edited, periodically, methodically, and without consent. That the stories we inherit, the discoveries we celebrate, even the catastrophes we fear, might be fragments of a larger cycle designed to repeat until some unseen threshold is met. And if these libraries are synchronized rooms within that cycle, then their recent resurfacing is not an accident. It is a countdown. A skeptic could argue none of this means anything. That the year 1904 is coincidence. That Protocol 12R is administrative noise. That the patterns exist only because we search for them, but the records say otherwise. The gaps align, the directives converge. The erasures match perfectly across institutions that never spoke to one another. Now the question reaches all of us. If knowledge can be sealed, redacted, and reissued on a schedule, then what does it mean to trust the world we live in? What does it mean to trust memory itself? The cycle is approaching its next window. Archive it or deny it. This video is created for analysis and storytelling. Sources are public. Approach extraordinary claims with healthy skepticism.